Okay. All right, can everyone hear me? Great. Well, I want to welcome everyone who's here in the room and also for those who are joining us online. I'm Jane Yokoyama. I'm one of the members of the General Topics Fab Friday Committee. I also want to introduce Laura Patlove, who's also on the committee, Anne Marie Clancy, and Barbara Griswold. And also to let you know that next week, the Health and Education and Science Committee is sponsoring Sleep and the Microbiome by Dr. Brett Senior. And in 2 weeks, we'll be presenting Animal Psychology by Hal Herzog. All right, if you are interested in doing an OLLI program, you have a proposal or a suggestion, please go on the OLLI website, and there are forms to fill out, and the committee is happy to look at them, and hopefully we'll use one of them for one of our next presentations. So I am delighted to introduce David Huff and tell you a little bit about him. He's a native of Maine, and he's an avid hiker, mountain biker, and he's also an award-winning photographer who lives here in Asheville. He's the founding chair of George Masa Foundation. The foundation's mission is to provide young people with tools and resources necessary to engage in creative and impactful strategies for conservation and climate action. The foundation has an excellent website. I just went on it, and I know that he's going to be talking about it. Okay. David's other interests include being a council member on the Carolina Mountain Club. He's responsible for maintaining a 2.5-mile segment of the Appalachian Trail. He's also on the board of trustees for the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation. David received his master's degree in psychology from the Pacifica Graduate Institute. He also has a master's in education from George Washington University and a bachelor's degree from George Mason University. He received his training in outdoor leadership from the North Carolina Outward Bound School, and as a Leave No Trace master educator, he promotes best practices for sustainably enjoying the outdoors. He's also an Eagle Scout and a former Scoutmaster. When he's not traveling, David makes the most of his home in Asheville, where he soaks up the region's beautiful natural beauty and the vibrant culinary and art scene. Please, you can ask questions throughout his presentation, but wait for the microphone to speak. And also, don't forget to silence your devices and keep your drinks covered. So thank you, David, for giving us the opportunity to learn more about George Masa. Thank you.
Well, konnichiwa. Ohayou gozaimasu. That's how George Masa might have greeted you had he been here today. Raise your hand if you're familiar with George Masa already. Great. So this is going to be a collective experience. You very well may know things about George Masa that I don't know, because I'm not an expert on George Masa and I'm not an historian. I'm a photographer, and I've created a foundation in his name, like Jane said, to encourage young people to engage in conservation and climate action. But I'm going to talk a bit today about Masa from the perspective of a photographer. I'm going to share some of his photos with you, and then some personal connections that I have with those photos and the work that I do here in Western Florida. So the cool thing about UNC Asheville is the archive for the Carolina Mountain Club. So our archival material is housed here, and so there's a number of archival material related to George Masa right here at UNCA. All right, so let's get going. More walk, less talk. George Masa was famous for saying that. He was a man of action. So let's talk about what he did. First of all, this is my disclaimer. I am not an historian, but these people are. Paul Bonesteel and Janet McHugh have a brand new, wonderful book out about George Masa. I suggest that. You can get it, I think, at Malaprops. I'm sure you can, Amazon. They've done amazing research. So if you want to know backstory and history and some new stuff that's come to light, highly recommend it. Also, Danny Bernstein, who's no stranger to OLLI. Danny's book on the Carolina Mountain Club. She has a good section in there about George Masa and his relationship with the club. also a wonderful history about the Carolina Mountain Club. Those are historians. I'm a photographer. All right. So 3 years ago, here in Asheville, the state of North Carolina recognized George Masa with an historic marker. He is the first and currently only person from Asia to be recognized in the state of North Carolina with an historic marker. This was a fun day, an unveiling of this marker. It's across from Farmburger in downtown Asheville, which was in the building there was where he had his photography business. So this, check that out, it's pretty cool. So who is this guy, George Masa? Well, let's get some details out of the way. We now know, thanks to the research by Janet and Paul, that his Japanese given name was Soji Endo. And we always knew when he died because he died here in Asheville in 1933, but now we know when he was born. He was born April 6th, 1885. This means he was 48 years old when he died, relatively young man. He came to Asheville in July 1915. He worked at the Grove Park Inn. He worked in the laundry room, and historians think that he was drawn to Asheville probably with a job placement from the Grove Park Inn, which was bustling then. The Grove Park Inn was the place to be. So he worked in laundry, but he very quickly started to become a photographer there at the Grove Park Inn, and then developed a commercial photography business. He's an important early member of the Carolina Mountain Club. He is an advocate for the creation of Great Smoky Mountain National Park and an advocate for the Appalachian Trail. So I want to give you that as some background context, so let's dive into that. So because he was here in 1915, he was here for the flood of 1916. These two photos and the two photos I'm going to show you are attributed to possibly having been taken by George Masa. These are part of the Buncombe County Library collection, and this is what they say about these photos. The flood of 1916 killed about 80 people, was devastating like our flood, Helene, was devastating. You can see here rails, bridges, all damaged. If these are George Masa's photos, and he was starting to do photography then, you see some of his early work in this. And he was doing what any photographer would do, myself included, which was to take a camera and run out and capture an historic event like the flood of 1916. Because many of my friends who are photographers, not only did we go out, and I'll show you some of my photos, but we're still going out, still capturing, still documenting the effect of Helene on this region now. These two photos are interesting. You see the bridge on the far back? That was torn down in the 1950s, but that's Clingman. That was the bridge linking West Asheville to the rest of Asheville on the far right back. So this means that the River Arch District coming down from that bridge further down, and you see the car turned over on the right. I'm going to show you a photo of mine with a car in the river. So the same tragedy repeated over again. On the left, that is the bridge. On the bottom right, that's a Clingman Bridge. It was called the West Asheville Bridge, but that's Clingman Avenue. And you can see the debris piled up there on the left. So these four photos, they believe, were taken by George Masa. Whether he took these or not, I have no doubt that as a photographer, he did document and photograph what was taking place in 1916. Sadly, many of his photos have been lost. So we have some wonderful photos of Masa. Many were lost after his death. However, new ones are being found. New photos of his were found in the Appalachian Trail Conservancy archive and rescued by a professor at George Mason University, my alma mater, and there are records of his photos there. All right, flood of 1916. So I'm going to very quickly talk about his commercial work in Asheville. So George Masa was the photographer for the Asheville Chamber of Commerce. So he was documenting and photographing Asheville in that early part of the 20th century. So you can recognize the square on the right. Of course, the Vance Monument's no longer there, and we no longer have streetcars in Asheville, trolley system, but there you go. You can see where some of the downtown is still intact, like we have today, fortunately. But that was what Asheville looked like then. This is probably taken from his office or his studio up above. Top left, this is a great example of what he was doing with his photography. Many of the photographers of the day, they would colorize. Remember, they weren't using color film back then. He shot on film, but not color film. So they would colorize the postcards in order to sell. right? It's one way to make a living. So this is an example of one of his photos of the Grove Park Inn, where he worked, that was colorized and sold as postcards. Bottom left is, of course, Biltmore House, and he took a number of photos of the Biltmore estate. They have some of his photos in their collection. Some of them are quite lovely. But he was shooting for the Vanderbilts, taking photos for them commercially of the estate at that time. So he was a working photographer. He was a commercial photographer. He was making a living when he left the Grove Park Inn as a photographer, which I know is a tough row to hoe, right, to make a living as a photographer. But that's what he was doing, because that was his passion. He was developing his craft, but he was doing it to make a living. But his greater passion, rather than just doing the work he needed to do to follow his passion, was the outdoors and these beauty in these mountains. So here's his landscape photography. Here's his beautiful conservation photography. This is George Masa's brilliance now starting to present itself. These are the Black Mountains, and look at how lush and green, right, and unspoiled those mountains are, and many of them are today. Now, Masa was carrying these big cameras that we think of as an Ansel Adams camera, the big, large format camera on the big wooden sticks. Masa was not a tall man, not a big man. He was a tiny man, and he was carrying heavy gear. This was heavy gear. All of us today are photographers, aren't we, right? And we carry our camera with us in our phone, right, in our pocket. Well, Masa was carrying these huge cameras with gear to go with the cameras, filters, etc. So he would go out, and when you were going to photograph back then, it wasn't now like you could just shoot something on the fly. Because of all that gear and equipment, he had to plan his trips. And remember, these mountains here were very much wilderness 100 years ago. There were roads, but the highway system hadn't been developed yet. That was started to be developed in the 1920s in North Carolina, but it originally wasn't here. A lot of small roads, a lot of dirt roads, gravel roads, and the trail system hadn't been developed the way it is now. A lot of footpaths, a lot of farm trails, a lot of livestock trails, trails that the natives built, etc. But this was really wide open wilderness. So in order to capture this, as a photographer, he would plan his day. Now, one of the things that photographers love, and raise your hand if you are a working amateur photographer or professional photographer. Great, great. So you know, right? You know that lighting is everything. And for Masa, light was important. And what photographers really love is morning light and evening light. You've heard of the golden hour, right? So he would go back out in the wilderness either really early to be there to sleep out the night before, to be there to capture the morning, or to get there to capture the evening, right? And this was much more difficult than me just popping in my car, driving up on the Blue Ridge Parkway and setting up my shot, right? There's a lot of work and a lot of planning on his part. Also, one of the things I love about these two photos is photographers, we love clouds. When you have sky, you love to have clouds. And so he was really keen on light and composition. So two of his beautiful photos of the Black Mountains. Oh, and by the way, I would love for you to ask questions as I go. We'll have a part at the end, but feel free to interact with me. All right, where is this? Raise your hand if you think you know what that is. Yes. Bingo, there you go, Grandfather Mountain. So that's a favorite shot of mine of his. And, you know, there's the meadow, I guess, where they have the Highland Games today, but Grandfather Mountain. So his range was extensive. He also went down outside of Charlotte to Crowder's Mountain and photographed down there. Went down to Georgia with the Appalachian Trail, taking photos there. But his love and most of his attention here was in Western North Carolina and also Eastern Tennessee. Linville Gorge, look at that. Who here has hiked in Linville Gorge? Yeah, okay, you see the gorge on the left? So this is two photos that have been put together. So he took a photo on the left, and you can see the divider in the middle, and the photo on the right to make a panorama, right? But I think it's just a stunning, look at those mountains, right? You know, today, if you start going to the right of there, you start moving down, there's development there now, right? On the right of that photo, you'd see houses. You don't back then. Sitting Bear Rock, which is the top of Linville Gorge. So great photo of the big rock, great composition, but look at the right. And this is what's wild about Masa shooting on film. You know, I have the advantage as a digital photographer of, hey, I can immediately see what I've shot, right? And then because I'm lazy and it's all memory, I just shoot a bunch of photos. Maybe one of them will turn out right. Well, he had to really plan and think through his shots because he didn't really know what he got until he got back to his studio to develop it. Now, as a person of his craft, he had a very good idea what he was shooting as he matured as a photographer, which is pretty astounding. But even then, not ever sure what he got until he got back. But look at the mist on the right. I mean, that's our mountains, isn't it? That sort of misty fog and captured on this old film. Mount Mitchell was a favorite of his. And on the right, he created, this is what I love. This is sort of like, back in the day, I think everyone in this room remembers when we would actually print our photos and create scrapbooks, right? That's an advantage we have. We remember that. Well, he was creating a scrapbook. So there is a scrapbook that he created of the Mountain Toll Road because the Blue Ridge Parkway hadn't been built yet, right? So he came up the old Mountain Toll Road and he created a scrapbook, and this is one of the pictures, pages out of that. That's over at Western Carolina University in their collection. But once again, right, capturing the clouds. I mean, this photo on the left is probably, it could be close to 100 years old, but it looks like it could have been taken yesterday, right? All right, do you recognize these waterfalls? The one on the right's kind of easy. What is it? Looking Glass, good. What about the one on the left? Anybody hang out in Highlands, Cashier's area up in Highlands? Dry Falls. Right, on the left. That's the fall you can walk around the back. Yeah, so it's Dry Falls on the left. He shot a lot up in Highlands, and this is an interesting thing about George Masa. So as we get into his conservation around Great Smoky Mountain National Park and the Appalachian Trail, because he was a working photographer, he also took photos of the Highlands area for the first developers of Highlands, who were taking that area up there, creating brochures and marketing pieces to promote people to buy land up there to build homes, right? So he was the commercial photographer for the developers, while at the same time he was working to advocate for protecting and saving the mountains. So he spent a lot of time up in Highlands, and the Highlands Preservation Society has some wonderful collection of his work from up there. So there he is, and there he is with his wild-looking cameras that you don't really see today. And I'm not a photo historian or a photography historian, so I can't tell you what those are, but you can Google and find out. But look at him. See how he was related to his cameras? Not a big guy. And you see the cameras, but also the box on the right on the ground. So you use filters. So he had these big old filters. So there's a lot of gear he's taken out, and the film and everything else. According to the records, this is at the Biltmore estate where that photo was taken of him.
Who took the picture?
Don't know, and it's a good question. And many of the photos taken of him, we don't know, right, who took the photos. All right, so great, thanks for that. Any other questions while the mic's floating around? Yeah, there's a question over here.
So this might be a subject you're going to drill into later, given your background on both the conservation side as well as the photography side. So he's doing a lot of early photography for early development of property.
Right.
Did he communicate any concerns at that time or later in his career and years about how he maybe facilitated the overdevelopment of some areas?
Not that I know of. There's not a lot of... He wrote a bit, and there's we know a lot about him with his correspondence, particularly with Horace Kephart, who I'll talk about in a minute. But it's a very good question. You know, as a working person and a working photographer, I mean, this is something that I think anyone that's doing this type of work thinks about. I mean, I'm a conservation photographer, but I shot a lot of photography for Sonic Automotive, which is the largest automotive dealership in the United States, shooting beautiful cars and car dealerships to make a living. So yeah, there's that complication. Good, any other questions? Yeah, in the back?
How large of a studio did I mean, like, how many people did George
I think
employ?
that's a good question. I believe he had one person working for him, but I would refer you back to Paul and Janet's book. They go into greater detail on that. It's a good question, how many people worked for him. I think there was one assistant at one time. Yeah. And then you'll see as we get into the Carolina Mountain Club how the Carolina Mountain Club helped him in the field. Good. All right. Oh, and I'm sorry. The reason I have this slide up is I want to talk about now the Carolina Mountain Club, the Appalachian Trail, and Great Smoky Mountain National Park. So the Carolina Mountain Club, George Masa was an early, very important member of the Carolina Mountain Club. Any Carolina Mountain Club members here? Yeah, okay, good. Yep. I see a number. Of course, Lola and Henry I know, and Henry and I were up doing trail work on, well, you were, I was taking photos, on the Appalachian Trail yesterday in the snow. Yes, thank you, Henry. We're going to get to that in a minute. All right. So very early here, the Carolina Mountain Club, you see we've always been a club of both men and women, and George Masa's in both of these photos. He's right here, and he's over here, right? So he was a beloved early member of the Carolina Mountain Club. The Carolina Mountain Club was formed in 1923. It kind of hung out for a number of years, and then it merged with another club that Horace Kephart and George Masa were part of. And so Masa then was part of that next iteration where they really started to become an active club. And so he led hikes and then, of course, used this as an opportunity to go out into the field and do his photography. And here we have Carolina Mountain Club members in action with Masa. Masa invented or developed this wheel, bicycle wheel device, in order to measure distance. And this was part of the mapping of the Appalachian Trail, because the trail, Masa, and we'll talk about that a little bit more around the Appalachian Trail, but he used this tool to measure distance. I mean, we didn't have LiDAR, we didn't have geo satellites, and you couldn't have a long tape measure, right, to measure the whole length, right? So developed this thing, and these are actually Carolina Mountain Club members here on the left. They've identified some of these folks that are here. They've got a map on the ground on the right. So they're helping him to create the mapping of the Appalachian Trail. On the right, this is a very iconic photo that I'll talk about in a minute, but this is also a good friend of his and Carolina Mountain Club member with him in that photo. So the Carolina Mountain Club, not only did Masa lead hikes for the club and do his photography, but the members were very integrated in a very important part of his work and his photography and his advocacy work. Masa died in 1933, and Horace Kephart, which many of you have heard of, Horace Kephart was the famous writer who came, and it was his writing and Masa's photography, and I'll talk about that in a minute with the Smokies, that was so important, and their relationship was very important, a very deep friendship. Kephart was honored with Mount Kephart named for him. And he wrote before his death that he thought Masa should have something named for him in the Smokies. Now, remember, this is 1920s United States. There was a large, heavy Asian racism, or racism against Asian people back in that time. And Paul and Janet actually unlock a whole series of events that took place here in Asheville that Masa had to deal with. I'll let you buy their book and read that. But because Kephart had advocated for this, the Carolina Mountain Club picked this up, and they didn't let the dream die. So in 1961, a peak for Masa was named, or a knob in Great Smoky Mountain National Park. So there's Masa Knob, and fittingly, it's on the shoulder of Mount Kephart, right? Isn't that beautiful? Because their friendship was so tight. When Kephart died tragically, he was killed in an automobile accident. The taxi driver was drunk, and they were all probably drunk, and went off a road in Bryson City. Masa was devastated, and it was a couple years. He only lived another couple of years before he died. But he was honored, so we have Masa being honored in Great Smoky Mountain National Park because of the Carolina Mountain Club. So let me tell you about the Carolina Mountain Club, because this is part of Masa's legacy. The club is the oldest and largest hiking and trail maintenance club in the Southeast United States. We have over 1,000 members, some of whom are in the room today. This club is 100% volunteer run. There are no paid staff. There never have been. The club has only missed 3 annual meetings. This isn't on here. In its 100-year run, only did not hold an annual meeting 3 times. One was the Second World War. I think it might have been the Korean War, another event. and then Helene. We did not hold an annual meeting last year. We will this year. We lead over 200 hikes per year, maintain over 440 miles of trail. 94 miles of that's the Appalachian Trail that we maintain, and then 150 miles of the Mountains to Sea Trail. So a very active hiking and trail maintenance organization. Because we're volunteer run, we would love to have you join us if you're not. Join us for a hike, join us for trail maintenance. Henry's a trail maintainer and a hike leader, and he can tell you that no experience is necessary, right, Henry, to do those things, although he's very experienced at both, right? So this is part of George Masa's legacy is this club, the largest and oldest hiking and trail maintenance organization in the Southeast, engaged in conservation, engaged in hiking, part of conservation, and trail maintenance, trail building, trail maintenance. What many people don't understand is that with these beautiful public lands we have, the federal government and also local government, state, is very dependent upon volunteers to help maintain our public lands. So most of the trails that you end up hiking on in this region has been maintained and is being maintained by a volunteer. So that's one of the cool things about this, and this is a direct result of George Masa's legacy. On Thanksgiving weekend, we had 130 volunteers show up Saturday or Sunday after Thanksgiving, the largest turnout we've ever had in the town of Hot Springs, to start doing some rehabilitation work in Hot Springs. We have a Boy Scout troop there, fun little boys there in the middle and the bottom. This was a big plastic culvert thing that had been pulled out of the river, working along the French Broad here to remove debris from the flood and to really help Hot Springs get back on its feet. The Appalachian Trail, as you may know, runs right through the town of Hot Springs. Hot Springs is an important part of the Appalachian Trail system. Many thru hikers will take what they call a 0 day there, spend a night there, have showers, etc. The local businesses depend on the Appalachian Trail because of all that traffic coming through there. So the trail is an economic generator. So getting the trail back is important for Hot Springs getting itself back. So we were very excited to have that whole group of volunteers. We had volunteers come from 7 different states that weekend to do this work. And this, of course, many efforts are going on to help here in Helene, and many groups are working in Hot Springs. We're not the only one, but that was our weekend and that day. All right, questions about Carolina Mountain Club before I move to Appalachian Trail? Anybody have a question about the club or Masa with the club? Okay, great. All right, so the Appalachian Trail. Any thru hikers here? Anyone thru hiked the trail? Okay. How about section hikers? Hiked part of the Appalachian Trail? Yeah, a lot of us. Okay, that's me too. I'm not a thru hiker, right? Okay, so it is the longest hiking-only footpath in the world, right? Roughly 2,190 miles that kind of wiggles every year, right? It's always in motion. And it passes through 14 states. So this was developed, of course, in the early part of the last century. And the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, which is the former organization, turns 100 this year or last year. They're a year behind Carolina Mountain Club. But the developing of this trail, of course, was a huge undertaking and required volunteers from across the country to help do this. So George Masa played a very important role in our part of the country in developing the Appalachian Trail. And he used his photography to do this. So this is Jones Meadow on the left, if anyone knows the Appalachian Trail. You can see back in the back, I'm trying to figure out where you're looking, Roan Mountain is in the far back in the middle of that photo. I use my pointer. Roan Mountain's back here, so this is looking into Tennessee, right? So I-26 comes right up through here, okay, going into Tennessee. So what he would do, take a photo, and I stitched 2 photos here together, take a photo, then he would draw on the photo where he was proposing the Appalachian Trail go. They were also naming peaks because now we take this for granted, but he and both Horace Kephart and the Smokies were trying to keep a record and create the official names of peaks, because you can imagine someone on one holler maybe called it one thing and someone on the other holler called it something else. So they had to decide what these were going to be named. I'll tell you about this area here in a minute, but this is all maintained by the Carolina Mountain Club, very beautiful up in here. And of course, we were back over here yesterday, Henry, right, doing trail work back there. But this is how he melded together his photography. Also, he was a map maker, so drawing the map and naming. And his letters, the correspondence that was discovered, that's now at George Mason University, his actual letters from him on Carolina Mountain Club letterhead, because the Carolina Mountain Club was already there, proposing these routes for the Appalachian Trail. So Big Bald, this is a famous section of the trail. As we move closer in, you see Roan Mountain in the top right. Okay, once again, another example of him using his photography, and the trail's not there yet. Do you see the people down here? I think this is a woman wearing a dress, back in the day, right? Okay, up on that meadow. All right, this is an iconic photo. It's on the cover of Janet and Paul's new book. I'm going to tell you about this photo. This is on the Appalachian Trail, but for many years, it was thought to be in North Carolina. In fact, many folks thought it might be on Graybeard Mountain in Montreat. Now, I lived in Montreat, and I never saw anything like that in Montreat, but someone had written on the back of the photo, someone, I think one of Masa's assistants or someone that had worked with him after his death, that it was Graybeard. So there was all this effort to try to find where is this in North Carolina. Well, it turns out it's not in North Carolina. I was giving a presentation to a group of younger folks last year, all in their 20s and 30s. And after my presentation, I shared this photo. One young person came up and said, "I think I know where that is. I'm from Greenville, Tennessee, and I think that's in Greene County because I think I've been there." So I went up there once he told me where this was, and I photographed it, right? How about that? And it turns out that this is Black Stack Cliffs in Cherokee National Forest. It's about 20 feet on the other side of the state line. So it's just in Tennessee. So when we made this discovery, and this is what excites me about this, is it's history alive, right? We're still discovering things, still finding out things. When we made this discovery and validated this, I sent a message to the superintendent or the head forester of Cherokee National Forest. His office is in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I said, I thought you all in Tennessee might like to know that this iconic photo, although we North Carolinians thought it was on our side of the state line, it's really in your forest. And he was so excited that he copied all his area foresters, and they all got very excited about that. So just across. Now, this is part of the AT, the Appalachian Trail, that we maintain. Bill Sanderson, a good friend of Henry's and mine, maintains this section. This is a trail off the AT. Bill is also a sawyer, so he uses chainsaws to do our work. So he went up immediately and cleared the path, right? So we can much more easily walk out to Black Stack Cliffs. So this is an iconic photo that's now being identified. So what's fun about this is one of the only places that we can actually stand where George Masa stood, because we know where he's standing, right? So that's kind of cool to go back. So when I came out that morning and I went, this is it, and then I went over to find the rock I thought it was taken from, I videoed myself, right? Because this is sort of an iconic moment having this here. But Charlie, the young person who identified this, gets all the credit for naming it. So back in this summer, my nephew, who I'll talk about in a minute, was through hiking the AT. And so we went up there, and my friend Sarah Decker, who's a phenomenal photographer here in Western North Carolina, she took this photo of Benji and me up on that rock. So I'll talk about Benji because this is part of George Masa's legacy. This is the section of trail, or part of the trail, that I maintain that Jane mentioned for the Carolina Mountain Club. I'm a trail maintainer. Fortunately, I'm not the only one maintaining that section of trail. Carolina Mountain Club members, volunteers all the time, are helping maintain that section. I'm simply the designated person that goes and checks on it every other month. I have a shelter on my section of the trail. There's a shelter every 8 to 10 miles on the Appalachian Trail. And on our 94-mile stretch, we have 10 shelters. This shelter was built in 1939. It's one of the original shelters, very simple shelter, but built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. So it was built after Masa died, but it was built as part of his legacy to that trail. Benji, a couple of years ago, for his spring break during college, decided that he wanted to come down and hang out with me, his uncle, and to hang out on my section of the Appalachian Trail. So we went in there, and my section, I can drive in a gated Forest Service road. It's about a 4.5-mile drive in. I have a key to the gate, unlock it, lock it behind me, drive in 4.5 miles to this shelter. I tell folks I'm part of a poor man's gated community, right? Because there's my shelter. So Benji decided to come down and hang out with me. There's a little bit of story here. I want to talk about this here. So he's using what's called a Holtzbrook axe. And at the time, the reps for Holtzbrook, which is the oldest axe makers in the world, it's a Swedish company, they were here. They were friends of mine, the reps. Benji's mother's heritage, my sister-in-law is Swedish, so I thought, okay, when Benji's here, I'm gonna reach out and see if I can get a Holtzbrook axe. And sure enough, Matt, he and his wife graciously gave us 2 Holtzbrook axes. We took them, Benji used them. I took photos of Benji in action. I sent those to Matt. 2 weeks later, and Benji had already been following Holtzbrook's Instagram because he's a young boy from Minnesota. He said, Uncle Dave, your photos you took of me are on Holtzbrook's Instagram, right? So I'm now like the super popular uncle, right? Because my nephew's on Holtzbrook and he's sharing it with his girlfriend, all right? So a very special weekend for Benji and me. We also, because we could drive in and be 100 yards from my shelter, we brought in things to make breakfast the next morning for the thru hikers that were staying there. So Benji made banana, chocolate chip, and blueberry pancakes to order. This is a special treat. This is March. It had sleeted the night before. Thru hikers usually don't build a fire in the morning because they got to get going. On the Appalachian Trail, when you do something for someone, when you give a ride or give food or do a favor, it's called trail magic. So this is Benji doing trail magic. And one of the people, the guy in the middle, he was so excited. We told him the night before we were going to be doing this, and he said, trail magic, right? So that was then. So this year, Benji decided to thru hike the Appalachian Trail, right? So I dropped him off in Maine this spring. He was the second to the last person to start the trail this year because he was finishing college. And he ended up in Katahdin, much to the shock and embarrassment of his mother. Those are the same shorts he started with that he ended up with. But that's Appalachian Trail. So I share you with this year because this is part of George Masa's legacy, right? They're helping to develop this long footpath where young men and women, and not necessarily young men and women though, find themselves, find direction, have experience on this long footpath. Benji now is going to be joining the Peace Corps next fall. So he's going to pay forward what he's gained here. Question, yeah. Question?
Where's he going in the Peace Corps?
Yeah, it's to be decided. He was accepted last year and had to defer, so he's hoping Africa somewhere. Were you in the Peace Corps?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Want to talk with you afterwards. Any questions about the Appalachian Trail? I'm getting ready to move off the Appalachian Trail with a tangent here. Okay. Yes, and we'll bring a microphone down for you. Thank you. So that way the Zoom folks can hear you. She's in the front row, Jane.
How much did Helene impact the trail in Western North Carolina?
Big time, and I'm going to show you some photos. Okay. So yes, thank you, big time, big time. How much did Helene impact the trail, she asked, and I'll address that here in a moment. Any other questions about the AT, George Masa and the AT? So he was part of the original team. I mean, this isn't just a guy out there. He was part of the original Southern team advocating for and creating the Appalachian Trail. So what's really wild about this guy is, he was lost to history. And then Janet, in her book that she co-authored about Horace Kephart, they mentioned Masa. And then Paul Bonesteel with his first documentary on George Masa, The Mystery of George Masa. That's how I found out about George Masa. And then, of course, Ken Burns, when he did his documentary in the national parks, mentions both Kephart and Masa. So Masa's been rediscovered, fortunately, because his work was profound. All right, so while Benji was hiking about 2,200 miles of the Appalachian Trail, I was doing 70 miles of the Shinitsu Trail in Japan. The Shinitsu Trail, and the reason I'm sharing this story with you is the Shinitsu was the first official, what we call a long trail in Japan. And it was advocated for by a guy who came over here about 20 some odd years ago and thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail. He was a prolific Japanese outdoorsman, conservationist, and writer. So he was inspired by his thru-hike on the Appalachian Trail and trail magic to advocate for the development of this long trail in Japan. This is beautiful Japanese territory here. This is east and kind of north of Tokyo on the other side of the main island. The Sea of Japan is just to the left of here. And this is a mountain range that it goes on, which is 600 and then ends up at over a 7,000 foot peak. So the size of our mountains and a little higher here, but very similar in some ways to our mountains. And what's special about these mountains is there's a ecological diversity of these mountains. Japan was reforested after the Second World War because so much of the country had been destroyed by the United States. And so they had to rebuild, and they deforested. At least 40% of the country was deforested in order to rebuild. And then they replanted sort of monotheistic culture of trees, which was thought of to be the best practice back then. Now we know that's not the case. Fortunately, this area has a lot of variety and diversity among its plant life, and some of the plants are very similar to here. Anyone have hydrangeas growing in their yard? Right. Well, here you see them in the woods, right? They're just everywhere, growing wild and beautiful. So I decided to hike the Shinitsu Trail because here's a trail in Japan developed by the Japanese as their first long trail, inspired by a trail in the United States that a Japanese man had been a very important advocate for, and they didn't know about him. Right? When this trail was developed, George Masa's story is only now starting to be heard and understood by folks back in Japan. So I wanted to go back to kind of pay it back and experience their trail. So let me show you some of the beauty here. This is the top of Mount Neba, which is it's an ancient volcano because many of the mountains there are volcanic. And it was named by the ancient people that lived there because they felt like this was where the gods grew their rice on these fields on the left. This is the mountain range in the back. I'm getting ready to come through. These are rice paddies here, and the rice in this region is amazing. So I'm getting ready to walk down that road on the right. You'll see this guy was really nice to me, the farmer, in the morning. He waved at me as I walked through. Much like the Appalachian Trail walks through farms and villages, so does the Shinitsu Trail. And then I headed out here into this village down here and then up into these wild, crazy mountains. And my destination, this mountain here, is back there in the clouds. Some examples of the beauty of the Shinitsu Trail. These beech trees, they're very, very important to this region. There are ancient beech trees here. And so part of the preservation of this trail is to protect these beech trees. Everywhere you go, almost in Japan, you see these wonderful icons to different deities throughout the countryside. And then just two more photos. This is my ascent on the last day of my hike on the left. And that's the trail. Those roots going through those trees is the trail. That was a wild day. And this is a vegetable stand through a small town that the trail runs through. What was beautiful about this, the Shinitsu Trail has modeled itself after the Appalachian Trail in that they have trail magic. So the Shinitsu Trail Club will have stations during the busy season, and people come and bring food and stuff, and they call it Trail Magic. They also created a hanger that looks just like the AT tag that you have when you're hiking. And you get a certificate at the end. My nephew Benji got his certificate for the almost 2,000 miles he did on the AT. I got my certificate for the 70 miles on the Shinichi. What was sweet, and I'll leave you about this because this is part of my experience of Japan, and also I think tells you why George Masa was a beloved member of the Carolina Mountain Club and by people who knew him, is the grace. So at the end of the trail, after I had that busy day here, I'd been rained on, I was muddy, I was wet, I was soaking. I was picked up by a ride at the end of the day and taken to a lovely inn where I was staying that night. The door opens and I'm all muddy and smelly, and this is a very lovely hotel. The young man comes and greets me, bows and greets me. I take off my boots, which is tradition, and take off my shoes. But I thought I should have taken everything off because I really was nasty. He ushers me in, he welcomes me and has me sit in the sort of the lounge area there, and he said he'd be right back. 5 minutes later, he comes with 3 other employees. He has my certificate. And I say, "You have my certificate." So I stand up and he presents it, and they all clapped. He gives me my certificate, and then they all bowed. So to be honored by the people in that country, and they're not part of the Shinichi Trail. They're not being paid to do this. This was simply a courtesy that they had my certificate for me at the end of the hike there. But the honor and the courtesy. So that type of warm reception that I received, I can imagine George Masa being that type of person here, which is why he ingratiated himself to the people here in Western North Carolina. Which is why when he died, the Asheville Citizen-Times ran a front page story on his death. Let's go to the Smokies. Yes, question. Mike? Yep. James, right behind you.
Masa's definitely honored, but it took a few years before his burial was paid for by the club. It took even longer for there to be a headstone. And just going back to the Smokies now, various books, one of them is Wild East, didn't really mention Masa, hardly mentioned Kephart. It's just interesting how they're venerated, and yet they weren't necessarily accepted, even though they were plotting the Appalachian Trail, which Tennessee wasn't that involved with. Very interesting historically.
Thanks for pointing that out. It is interesting, isn't it? This is why I think, first of all, historians and people doing the writing and gathering it, and then the storytelling and keeping these stories alive and having these experiences. You're absolutely right. When Masa died, he died in poverty. 1933, what was going on in the United States in 1933? Yeah, Great Depression. Fortunately for Masa, he died before the Second World War. I think that would have been a very difficult time. He no doubt would have been interned somewhere. So the Great Depression, he lost, his car was stolen shortly before his death. His business was faltering. So he died in poverty in 1933. The Carolina Mountain Club, then, members of the club paid for his burial in Riverside Cemetery. And Paul Bone still says in his documentary, he was interviewing a woman at the time who's now passed, but she was a little girl and knew Masa because he spent time with her family in their home. And she recalls on his day when he died, and he's buried in Riverside Cemetery over here. On the day of his death, she remembers it was raining, and she remembers a sea of black umbrellas. So people came out en masse to honor and welcome him. So yes, thanks for raising that. And Kephart as well. Right? Kephart was a giant writer of the time. His book on woodcraft was the definitive book forever for outdoor woodcraft, right? How do you survive? How do you live in the outdoors? But they were both, Kephart was a complicated character, right? If you read more about him, his background, definitely wrestled with some demons. And when you buy Janet and Paul's book, you learn a little bit about George Masa's background and some of the complications of him as a human being, which makes these individuals real And that's one of the things I like about them because, and one of the reasons we started the foundation in George Masa's name is that he's an easy character for young people to identify, to come to with, because he was an advocate, a conservation advocate, followed his passion. He was an immigrant. He was an outsider. He experienced incredible adversity, but he never gave up. His message and in his writing, he would write about his hardships, but he would end with the notion that I'm not going to let this get me down. I'm going to keep going forward, right? Which is a message I think a lot of us can use right now, right? All right, let's talk about Great Smoky Mountain National Park, because this was really Masa's passion and Kephart's passion, was the creation of Great Smoky Mountain National Park. You all know this probably. I remind people who come to visit us when they see our forest that most of what they're looking at may be 100 years old, but most of it's not. These are young forests because they've been logged numerous times. Fortunately for us, the trees we have here for the most part are not needed, so they're not logged as much, although we do have product here that's logged. And we have a national park which can't be logged, thanks to Horace Kephart, George Masa, and many others on the Tennessee side and elsewhere. I give you the Cherokee name, which I think is so beautiful, Shokonehe, land of the blue smoke. That's a photo of mine. I'll shamelessly share a few of my photos. This is a sunset from up at Mount LeConte. So Great Smoky Mountain National Park, this is one of the first maps of the park. If you see it today, it's a little bit different. But Great Smoky National Park is over 500 acres, about 522,000 acres of pristine, beautiful, very, very unique parkland. Anyone here hiked in the Smokies? Excellent. Okay, camped in the Smokies? All right, great. Done the AT in parts of the Smokies? Ah, great. Okay, good. Yeah, Henry, you don't count. Henry's done all the trails. Henry's hiked all 94 miles of the section we maintain in the Appalachian Trail. He's also bagged all the, how many of the 6,000 peaks, Henry?
40.
40. He's bagged it's a challenge, the Carolina Mountain Club. If you hike or bag 40 of the peaks over 6,000 feet, now you just can't drive up to them. You have to hike at least 5 miles. And many of those are in the Smokies, which required an overnight. So Henry's a wild man. I'm trying to catch up with him. So Great Smoky Mountain National Park. So why is this so important? And why was Masa concerned? Because of the deforestation, the clear-cut logging. You know, people were living here, so they were naturally cutting down for farming, to have farms. But also the logging. One of the beautiful things about the Smokies, I'll show you in a minute, it's about 24% is still old growth. Anyone hiked the Boogerman Trail in Cataloochee? Great, okay. So you've seen the old growth tulip trees there, which are massive. Well, the folks that own that land refused to sell to the logging company, which is why we have some of that old growth tulip trees there. But Masa was witnessing this deforestation, and this was important because this is such, we know now, if you're in the Smokies, what an incredible ecosystem this is. So he was motivated by this. These are his photos. So the pitch was that this was the last of the eastern wilderness, and it needed to be saved. So here's a panorama of Masa's photos that were stitched together, and the naming of the peaks in the background. So this is real advocacy work. Here's 2 photos of his in the Smokies. And here's a photo of his on the left and a photo of mine on the right. Sadly, much of his photography in the Smokies is gone. It's missing. So we don't have a lot. And some of it, we have a handbook to the Smokies. I'll show you in a minute. They're only there. We can't find them elsewhere. So this is looking out at Charlie's Bunyan off of Jump Off Rock, if you've been up in that area. That was Masa's photo taken sometime before 1933. And then my photo taken a couple years later, before now, much later. And you can see landslides, et cetera, there on the left, and how the growth has come back on the right. Mount Chapman is in the right, in the front of us, the foreground. That's a very favorite photo of mine, of his. This shows you sort of the quality of his work. Once again, he's shooting on these large format film cameras. And the Smokies didn't have the highway going through the park yet, right? And so you were really taking multiple day treks to carry your gear, carry your equipment. And for me, when I'm hiking in the Smokies on a well-groomed trail, it's a workout, right? So he and others are hiking up creek beds or hiking up footpaths that aren't official and carrying heavy gear to grab these photos. Three Forks is sort of in a vast wilderness on the North Carolina side. There aren't any trails in there anymore. But at the time that Masa was photographing, there was a logging operation down there. And Three Forks River, full of trout. Brent Martin, in his book that came out a number of years ago, he went down in there on the old trails. He's a fly fisherman. And Brent said he was just pulling trout out every time he cast his line. Just pristine, beautiful waters in there. Masa and Kephart, because they were also trying to make a living, had planned and hoped that after the park was created, they would have a tourist operation. And they would lead tours into the Smokies and have a place for people to come. So they saw that also as an opportunity for them to have a business venture when the park became a park. Sadly, neither of them lived to see that happen. But Masa was taking people into Three Forks. Very iconic photo. Anyone been to Chimney Tops? This is on the Tennessee side of the park. If you haven't, it's incredible when you drive down here. What's even more incredible now, if you look at the Chimney Tops now, you'll see people standing on the top, right? Well, this is closed off now by the park, and all that vegetation is gone because the huge fire that left the park a number of years ago and went into Gatlinburg and killed people in Gatlinburg is the Chimney Tops. That was one of the fires that started here. So Chimney Tops is destabilized because it burns so hot and burns so bright. The geologists, scientists fear that it's no longer safe for people to walk on. People do go up there as they go on the Bluish Parkway when they're not supposed to now, but it is officially closed off. But what a beautiful, iconic photo. And you see the people standing here. So in 1933, this guidebook came out, and this is the Guide to Great Smoky National Park, approved by the National Park Service, co-authored by George Masa, with photos by George Masa. Came out in 1933. What's interesting about this is the park was not yet a park yet. That didn't happen until 1934, but the official guide came out in 1933. Horace Albright, director of the National Park Service, had this to say about George Masa in the foreword to this book. George Masa, its co-author, knows and loves the region well. Those fortunate enough to have gone into the woods with him know that any guidebook that he may issue will be invaluable. I have spent many days in the Smokies with Mr. Masa and can speak from experience. I got a copy of this book off of Abe's Books. It's found it online. And so this is sort of a collector's item now. And the map I showed you at the beginning, the old map, there's a fold-up map. That's the fold-up map that's in the back of this book. So this tells you to your point that he was lost to history. And here he was the co-author of the first official guide to the park, right, with his photos. Masa died in 1933. The Smokies officially became a park in 1934, and President Franklin Delano Roosevelt dedicated it in 1940 up here at Newfound Gap. If you've been to Newfound Gap, you see the big stone work there. There's FDR there dedicating it. So sadly, neither Masa nor Kephart lived to see the park become a park. And what a park it is. The Smokies is considered the most ecologically diverse in our national park system. And I'm just going to read some of these things to you because they're amazing. 2,900 miles of streams. Think about that. 1,500 flowering plants. 200 species of birds. 200. I think I have about maybe at most 35 or 40 in my backyard. 200. And this is great. I think children would love this. 146 land snail species. Boy, you can't get more detailed than that. 100 native species of trees, 67 native fish. Has anyone done any snorkeling in our streams? Well, this is a new thing. So there's a snorkeling trails that are being developed. When my other nephew from Australia visited me a year and a half ago, I took him into Rocky Fork State Park. We got snorkels. You go snorkeling and you're swimming with the fish. And our native fish are very colorful, right? So it's amazing. You're down there with them. And he's an Aussie boy who lives on the shore, and he was so excited to see these little native fish. So if you get a chance, go snorkeling. Just grab a mask and stick your head in the creek. They're all over the place. 60 species of mammals. In fact, the greatest concentration of black bears per mile is in Great Smoky Mountain National Park. 43 species of amphibians, which is why the Smokies is called the salamander capital of the world. More variety of salamanders than anywhere else in the world. 39 species of reptiles, and 25% is old growth. This is part of George Masa's legacy. Imagine if Great Smoky Mountain National Park had not been preserved. We would lose this biodiversity. And how even more important is that biodiversity today? And so he didn't get to live to see this become a part, but this is indeed part of his legacy. Not only for the preservation of the biodiversity, but for those of us who travel here, who recreate in the Smokies, who fish, who camp, who hike, who love the beauty of that place. We have many people, George Masa, one of them, to thank for the creation and preservation of this place. A Japanese immigrant, right, who followed his passion to help preserve this park. Questions about Great Smoky Mountain National Park? We got a mic coming around, Jane. We got, oh, here we go. Laura, you've got a question in the front here. She's coming down. Price is right.
Actually, my question goes back to something before you got to the Great Smoky Mountain Park. You were talking about an area before the Blue Ridge Parkway existed, and you mentioned something, I believe, the Old Mountain Tow Road.
Yeah.
What was that? Where was that?
So Mount Mitchell has been a tourist destination. It's the first state park in North Carolina, Mount Mitchell State Park. And if some of you know more about the history of Mount Mitchell, please chime in. But there was a toll road. There was also a train that went up there that carried people. It didn't last that long, but you could ride a little train. And the toll road goes through Montreat. If you're in Montreat today, the old road that goes into Montreat goes up through the forest and heads up to Mount Mitchell that way. And that's how you got there, because there was no Blue Ridge Parkway yet. Yeah. Great question. Yes, down the front, we have another question.
Thank you. Just wanted to make a couple of comments. If anybody's not familiar, the North Carolina Humanities has an office near the VA, and they've put on programs. And Janet McHugh, who was Kephardt's granddaughter, was there with George Ellison.
Libby Kephart.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And, well, they were developing their book on Kephart. And also Dan Pierce was also writing one at that point.
Yes.
And also, what else I want to mention? If the animals that you just mentioned up there, there's a group called Discover Life in America, Discover Diversity, and they've got fantastic office up there. And we were able to, with a group, get into the archives and see the specimens that have been collected over the years, and it's a fantastic opportunity.
That's a great organization. Say it again.
Discover a diversity of life, discover life
In America.
in America.
Tennessee side, they're
Yeah.
a great group. Yeah. And
Right.
Tremont Institute's over there. They're great too.
Yes.
In that kind of work.
Yes, yes.
Thanks for bringing that up. Any other questions? Yes, in the back. James, right behind you with the mic.
A couple of things about the Smokies and about collections and all. I'm proud to say I'm going to call him a buddy of mine. I don't know if he's going to call me buddy. I'm going to call him a buddy. William Bill Hart, who has a book out, The 3,000 Miles, I believe it is, in the Smokies. He hiked them all. Also, a shout out to Bill and Alice Hart talking about collections. On the second floor of the library, Bill donated his lifetime of collection of the Smokies. He's been on, on all the boards associated with it. But it's the most comprehensive collection of Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee and Smoky Mountain Park history in the world, probably, right here on the second floor of the Smokies. Also, the last thing, just talking about Kephart and Masa, now there's a plaque on the rock at Kephart's grave in Bryson City of Masa. So they finally got together in the end.
Thanks for bringing both those together. So Bill and Alice Hart, hugely important in the history of all of this, and particularly George Masa. Alice is an amazing painter too. But I stand on the shoulders of people like that and the research and collecting they've done. And the plaque you mentioned, this was a beautiful thing that Kephart's great-granddaughter, Libby Kephart, did, where she had a foundation and they raised money. They put a plaque there, as you said, along with Kephart's wife, put a plaque for her next to the grave of Kephart in Bryson City to bring them back. So it was a beautiful thing. Yes, there's a question here. Yep.
Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. In the introduction, it was mentioned that George Masa Foundation encouraging youth to be involved in conservation and so forth. Do you have any information you could give us on that?
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, so thanks for being interested.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll get my pitch here in a minute. Any other questions about Smokies particularly? Okay, or comments and information. Great thing about being a group like this is the collective knowledge, right? It's so cool. All right, I need to talk about Helene. And we were asked in the beginning about the impact of Helene. So remember, 1916, George Masa arrived in Asheville 1915, so he was here to photograph and document Helene. And as a photographer, he would have done that, to tell the story. So I, as many other photographers, have done the same. So I'm going to share with you some of my Helene photos to give you a backdrop. We're all in this room experiencing Helene from one level to the other. Some of us here have lost our livelihood. Some folks have lost their lives. We've all been impacted. And we're all living in sort of a collective trauma to one degree or another. I don't know about you, but every day I see the brush pile still on the sidewalk 3.5 months later. Reminds me of how devastating this is, right? That systems have not caught up yet. We're not back to normal. And when we travel around and see the destruction, so much is not back to normal. So, you all have your experiences, Helene. I'm going to share you with mine. And this ties into the George Masa Foundation and Masa's work. This is Biltmore Village the day after Helene. I went down there. I didn't take my camera, but fortunately, I have one on my phone. You'll see the Grand Bohemian on the right, down in Biltmore Village. The water had been all the way up to the second floor, and all the furniture on the first floor had been moved all the way down and piled up against the windows. And then, of course, you see the rail. Remember the photos that are attributed to Masa in the beginning, the rail? Here we go again. Biltmore, entrance to Biltmore, the day after the flood. Do you see here the watermark? That's how high the water was. They've since taken down all of these sycamores. When Masa was here, these sycamores had just been planted, and they've removed them all, if you see it now, because of the damage. This building on the right is not there. They tore it down. This was the group reservation and the entrance to the parkway, to the park there, to the right of the gate. They took it down. It was not an original historic structure, simply built in the style, but it's no longer there. And of course, you know, I don't need to show you all debris, but you know, there you go. This is the River Arch District 2 days after Helene. This is Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. This was the Smoky Park Supper Club, if you knew that. And the rail bridge here. This is the River Arch District sign. So the French Broad, of course, is here. And of course, it had come all the way over here. So this is 2 days after Helene, right? The water still there. Remember the car in the photo from 1916? Here's a truck. This is Swano River as it's coming into Biltmore Village. So Thompson Street's here. The antique barn and all was over here. Of course, all this wiped out. And all this destruction and debris. And the rivers, of course, this is the ecological sort of disaster here, is not only are the rivers full of this, and Henry and I witnessed it, the Nolichucky, I'll show you some photos in a minute, but the devastation of the Nolichucky in Tennessee is just incomprehensible, and the debris is all still there. But you see how the riverbanks are now bare, right? So there's nothing holding the banks anymore. Here's the Nolichucky. I put this in here because if Tennessee was slammed, this is Irwin, Tennessee. This is also a direct tie into the Appalachian Trail. This is what the Nolichucky should look like. This was 5 days after Helene. The Nolichucky had gone this way. That's the hospital where 55 people were rescued off the roof by helicopters, right here. So the river went that way, all through here. This is Interstate 26. So the river's back here. And this bridge is the bridge that was damaged on 26. So going to Johnson City or Irwin, it's now 2 lanes as they rebuild that bridge. But you see all the debris, because the river's right there. But it spread all through here. Massive, massive devastation. Down river here, where Henry and I drove yesterday to head up to do trail work, the plastics plant, where the 6 people were washed away and killed, that you may have read about, is right down here. And the plant's devastated, but the plastics that they made are just strewn all the way down the interstate. Massive debris and devastation and loss of life. When I was traveling through Irwin, I was going there every week. I had use of an office in Johnson City, so I was going for water and supplies, and friends in Tennessee were very gracious, giving me supplies. I stopped at the Food City in Irwin, and there were about 100 folks, mainly from the Latino community, gathering to hold a vigil, one to remember one of the women who had died in the flood, and then honoring or hoping that the other would be found alive. She was not. She was found deceased. She was a mother of 2, 29 years old, and her last message to her husband was, take care of the children. The Nolichucky. So last June, my nephew Benji, hiking the Appalachian Trail, hiked. This is the Appalachian Trail as you cross the Nolichucky going upriver. The trail comes down, goes across this bridge, and there's the foot trail on the right. This was back in June. I went down to meet him. He took a 0 day, a day off. We hung out, and then he went over the bridge and off his way. This is the photo I took yesterday of the same bridge. The whole bridge is gone. So this section of the Appalachian Trail is no more, right? Because the Appalachian Trail, not only going through woods and footpaths, crosses bridges. Henry, you have a microphone for Henry? I've got to have a mic so they can hear. Yeah, I'll use a mic. Yeah, you wild man. Thank you.
At that location, there's was a hostel. Is that Uncle Johnny's?
Yes, Johnny's, and they're rebuilding it. Great question. So it got totally washed away, but they're rebuilding. It's a popular hostel. In fact, that's where my nephews stayed. So right behind me, behind my back, is that hostel being rebuilt. But it shows you the massiveness at this bridge, and a span of this bridge is right here now on the side of the riverbank, right? So part of the Appalachian Trail has been severely devastated, right? So how has the rest of the trails been impacted? So this is yesterday, up on a section of the Appalachian Trail in Tennessee. These are members of the Carolina Mountain Club. In these photos, we joined up with our compadres with the Tennessee Club that maintains this section up there. Paul Curtin on our left is our supervisor of the Appalachian Trail. He tells folks he's my boss because I maintain a section. So Paul's moving a log debris that's being cut by a sawyer on the right in the yellow shirt. The tree damage across the trail is extensive. But trail crews are going out there and removing trees that are fallen, but also having to rebuild the trail because in many places, root balls of trees came out and took the trail with them. So having to cut the root ball out and then rebuild the tread in the trail. Trail maintenance is an activity that goes on all the time. So before Helene, the Carolina Mountain Club has trail crews that are out every day of the week maintaining sections of trails in our region. So Helene has just added right to that. It's been a great recruiter for us. We have a lot of people, and particularly a lot of younger people, that are really excited about getting involved in trail work and are joining us. So this is a pitch to volunteer and help out with the Carolina Mountain Club. If you want to get outside with just really cool people, no experience necessary. And you don't have to use a chainsaw or carry big logs. People like me use loppers and lop stuff, right? There's jobs for everybody, right, on the trail, regardless of your experience or whether or not you feel like you're an outdoors person. We'll put you to work. There's something for you to do, and it's a great way to give back. Henry, you want to say something about your work yesterday? Was it like this where you were?
It was exactly like that. It was exactly like that. We had trees completely blocking the trail like I suspect that was. And when you first look at it, you can't imagine that whatever you could do could possibly move it, but you get working and you create a path, and it's pretty extensive throughout that whole area.
It's another thing too. Thanks, Jerry. Another thing too is the loss of the tree canopy is huge. So the trail has been impacted and will be impacted for our lifetime because of the loss of tree canopy. You know, 800,000 acres of forest were impacted by Helene. Great Smoky Mountain National Park is just over 500,000 acres. Yes, question back here?
I called a number of weeks ago over to the visitor center off of the Blue Ridge Parkway to see, because I usually, with friends, move where there are a lot of trails there that go to the Folk Art Center. And they kind of said, well, go at your own risk, basically. And I was just wondering if you had any information about those trails that go off near the visitor center.
Sure, it's a great question. First of all, I'll point out Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail is a great resource if you don't know them. They actually have on their website live updates, and they have a Google map showing you what's open. And I'll speak to being on the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation board now about the parkway. I'm not an authority, I'm not the definitive answer, but I'll share with you what I do know. If the parkway is closed, the Mountain to Sea Trail is closed, and it is illegal to be on the Blue Ridge Parkway in closed sections. It's closed. And it's closed because of the damage to the trails, also the damage to the road. Although it might look like the Blue Ridge Parkway is there, in some places the ground underneath the asphalt's no longer there. so it's simply hanging out. Huge sections of the parkway have been washed away. They're also working on the trail, and they need to, or on the parkway, so they need people to not be driving on the parkway. They need the barriers to be able to be open for emergency, but people have been crashing through the barriers, and sadly, hundreds of people have crashed through different barriers and moved barriers. So I'm not the trail police. I'm not going to snitch on you if you hike on the Mountain to Sea Trail where it's closed, but you could get ticketed because it is illegal right now for safety reasons. Sections, we're now able in what's called the Asheville corridor, which is from the French Broad River up to the Folk Art Center. You may now walk that stretch. It's about 11 miles, I think. It's not totally easy to walk on. In fact, we think sections they probably maybe not should have opened, but you can do it. The Park Service went through and did a quick rush on some of those trails with chainsaws, what we call rogue sawyers. People in the neighborhood have come up to cut. Once again, that is illegal. And then we're going in with our sawyer crews who are certified to work on public lands to make those trails wider and safer for passage. So you can hike the Asheville corridor. The parkways also open up if you want to go up to around Shining Rock Wilderness area. Parts of the parkway and the Mountain to Sea Trail are open up there. Of course, you want to go to Virginia, it's all open in there. From Mount Mitchell to Linville Gorge, the parkway experienced over 60 landslides. Parts of the parkway are no longer there. The mountain's no longer there. So we're in for a long haul on sections. A lot of questions, so we'll bring some mics over. Good.
I got it. Here you go.
Thank you. Unfortunately, this is like the one in the 10th century storm. Well, this could repeat given climate change and political environment and so forth. So in correcting this, is there some thought given to how can we anticipate in some aspect minimizing damage from future storms or rerouting trails or something like that?
That's a very good question. And with all the changes going on, not having a crystal ball, how this is going to play out. I do know that the professionals in the Park Service and the Forest Service who understand how this impacts their land that they are the stewards of, the managers of, have this in mind, right? So as we build recreation and maintain recreation, how do we adapt for a different climate? Although Helene was massive, we had Fred a number of years ago. Remember the devastation of Fred? Killed people in Haywood County, wiped out trails in Pisgah, the Davidson River area of Pisgah National Forest. And we still have the scars of Fred, and then Helene on top of that. So I think in terms of when we're, and this is just a nerdy practical response to that, trail maintenance and trail building has adapted. We used to do something called water bars to hold back water. Now we really build trails to let the water slide off the trail. So you find different techniques of how you use, because Paul Curtin here, he likes to say in trail maintenance, you want to keep the water off the trail and the people on the trail, right? So that's what we endeavor to do. So yes, it's going to continue to be something that we deal with. Yeah, other questions? Microphone down front, down here. All the way down. Here you go, Jane. Thank you.
I volunteer at the Visitor Center and was there yesterday, and I just want to remind people that right now, none of that 11 miles is open because of snow and ice.
Yeah, thank you.
So be sure you check. And there is actually, I think it's maybe new a couple weeks, on the website under Plan Your Trip, they actually have a section-by-section area that talks about the Helene damage, so you can see why it's closed, whether it was a washout, and they don't have any data yet about when it'll be repaired, but that will be changed as conditions change.
Thank you. So that's on the Blue Ridge Parkway website. Thank you for that. In the back.
Some positive information for you hikers. I don't know who's familiar with, but 6 or 7 of us called ourselves geezers. We have build a trail in Mars Hill on Bailey Mountain. There's a couple of loops of 6 miles. It's very hikeable. Go for it. It's open.
Thank you. Thanks for developing that. It's called, what's the name again?
Bailey Mountain,
Bailey Mountain.
right behind Mars Hill College.
You have to be an old geezer to hike on it.
You only had to be an old geezer to build it. Two and a half years.
Well, congrats. And, you know, that's what's fun about, I think, this area is the volunteerism and retired folks making volunteerism a second career. And I'm sure this room is full of folks that do all types of volunteering because that's who you are. And this is one way of doing that. So thank you. Other questions or comments? So this is Biltmore Village again. So what do we do with this? What do we do with Helene? What do we do with a changing climate? Remembering that all of us in this room are still experiencing some level of dissonance or trauma or disjointedness about what we've been through in Helene and what we continue to go through. What do we do when we see the massive devastation that's still here months after, where we know some things have changed, but other things look exactly like they do the day Helene hit? What do we do? Well, in Masa's name, I and some other individuals decided to create a foundation in his name to engage young people around conservation and climate action. So our name is the George Masa Foundation. And what we wanted to do here, so there is an existential angst felt by many young people. Probably that's been ginned up by the immediacy of news through social media, and those outlets probably adds to that. But they're also seeing in real time massive events, massive change to weather, massive change to climate. And what we wanted to do was to tap into sort of that creative spirit, that spirit of asking questions, that sort of unabashed spirit of caring that many young people have, who have not yet become cynics of the world or experienced too many bruises. So we wanted to really focus on middle schoolers and high schoolers. So we created this foundation to encourage them. And the three things, pillars of our foundation, are one is to, as we grow the foundation, we'll be providing grant money to young people to engage in conservation and climate efforts within their own communities. The second is we'll be having institutes here in the Asheville area because we have such a great wealth of knowledge of folks in the outdoors, around weather, et cetera, to hold conferences here. This last year, though, we started our inaugural George Masa Youth Conservation Prize. We had 266 young people from 26 different states submit photos for middle school categories and high school categories. And here's some of the winners here that we received. I don't know about you, that it moves me to see the artistry of middle schoolers and high schoolers and how they see the world. And then being an old guy that shoots photography, I'm like, I wish that was my photo, right? 26 different states as far away as Hawaii. Two of the photos here are from local winners. The iceberg on the top right took first place in the high school climate change category, a student who lives in Weaverville. Any idea what those yellow lights are? Bingo, fireflies, right? So this is a middle school photographer who lives in Fairview, and that's her photo there, winning photo there. We had a prize money for these students. The first prize was $500, second $250, third $100. Eno Hammocks, if you know Eagle Nest Hammocks here, which is headquartered in Asheville, they donated 10 hammocks, so the top winners got a hammock. The National Parks Conservation Association provided some funding for us, and will be providing funding again to help supplement those award winners. The Laurel of Asheville in this month's issue has a beautiful article on the three local winners. And quotes from each of those. So pick up the Laurel. It's a wonderful free magazine. I'm sure you all know it. Pick it up and you'll see their photos and quotes from them. The North Carolina Arboretum has gotten excited about this. Anyone here fans of the North Carolina Arboretum? Yes, yay. What another great gem and resource here in Western North Carolina. They're actually going to have an exhibit of Nat Geo, National Geographic wildlife photographers. That's going to be here starting this month, running through the spring. So they now want to display all of our winners there. So we're going to be displaying all of our winners' photos at the North Carolina Arboretum. Then we're going to, in April, have a reception. We're going to invite all of our winners. Don't know if the ones that live in Colorado or California or Hawaii will come, but they'll be invited anyway. We're going to have a reception for those young people there at the North Carolina Arboretum, having their work on display. So that's a wonderful partnership between us and that great organization. But what excites me about this is here's a way of saying yes. Yes to your craft. Yes to your vision. Yes to your passion for the outdoors. We want to encourage you to continue to have faith, to be positive, to engage, and be like George Masa, right? Remember, his car was stolen near the end of his life. It was the Great Depression. He died in poverty of tuberculosis. He had been exposed to the flu a number of years earlier, and that's probably what weakened him, and died at 48. But he didn't give up. Right? And so I think that's the message that we want to share through our foundation and through these young people. And then what I get out of it is I get to see work like this, which then inspires me to continue, right? To do what I'm doing. And it may just be hanging out with my friend Henry up on the Appalachian Trail in the snow, right? Clearing debris. So the through hikers can get through and they can spend the night in Hot Springs. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Yes, in the middle. A bunch of them. Go for it.
Was George Masa self-taught?
Yes, although he also trained with an established photographer here. But where he learned and how he picked it up, it's hard to say. There were some photographic books in his possession that he had purchased about the art of photography. He did spend some time out west. And once again, Janet and Paul's book is a great resource. But yeah, he didn't have, as far as we know, he did not have formal training. Yep. And as far as I know, none of those students that I just showed you have the formal training to the degree we would think that someone would have yet, right? But there you go. Yeah, there were other questions, hands raised in the back. Yes.
Yeah, comment. This is great, the photography work and the artistry of it and how it relates to Helene. But for people's general information, Mountain Express yesterday had a little piece promoting a show of a painter that just opened last night over in the library in West Asheville. And there's, I think, 31 pieces. They're all around themes of things that she's experienced and saw. And at least the samples I saw in the press were stunning.
That's what's beautiful about here is the artistry and the communication and the storytelling. Sarah Decker, who's a friend of Henry's and mine, who's a Carolina Mountain Club member, she took a class in tintype photography back in the spring, and she's been photographing Marshall. You might see some of her work in tintype. And kind of like Masa, he wasn't tintype, he was film, but she's exposing a piece of a metal plate and then uses chemical in the field to present the image. Her work, like the artist you're mentioning, is stunning, and it's another way of documenting and telling the story. Sarah Decker-Jones, I recommend her work. Yes, there was another hand raised somewhere. Comment or question, maybe? Cool. Jane, I'll turn it back over to you then.
There might be some online, so Janaki, were there any questions online?
Actually, there is nothing online.
Oh, good. Well, that's good. We get out early today. So I'll be hanging back here if you want to come up and talk. obviously mingle amongst yourself. Jane, thank you to you and the committee and all for inviting me and having me today. This was an honor to be with you all, so thank you.